Hi guys and welcome to my channel. My name's Abby. If you're new, welcome. If you've seen some of my other videos, you might know that I have two female Syrian hamsters called Petal and Peaches. I personally really love my hamsters and think hamsters make amazing pets. So today I'm going to be discussing whether having a hamster is the right pet for you. I'm going to be talking about some of the things that I've learnt since having hamsters and some of the things that I wish I knew before getting them. So the very first thing that I think is important to do before getting a hamster is make sure that you actually do research. I went on Pets at Home's website, which is just a pet shop in the UK, and I literally just read their information about hamsters and it isn't very comprehensive. It doesn't really tell you a lot. It basically just tells you that hamsters live for 2 to 3 years and that they need a cage and chew toys, and it doesn't really tell you much else. So I would really recommend joining Facebook groups, watching YouTube videos, and just look into whether having a hamster is right for you. And well done for being here. Thank you so much. You need to think about whether or not you have room to home a hamster. So hamsters need to have quite a large enclosure. I feel like this is a really big misconception about hamsters. People think that because hamsters themselves are small that they only need a small cage, and that simply isn't true. So in the wild, hamsters will run between 5 and 10 miles during one night, and this is because they are foraging animals, so they will be foraging for food and then bringing this food back to their burrows. So although they are small, they do need a large enclosure. So in the UK, it's recommended that a hamster has an enclosure which is 80 centimeters by 50 centimeters, which is 4,000 square centimeters. Like I said, this is because hamsters in the wild are foraging animals and they are very active during the night. So we need to emulate this foraging behavior in our hamster care by giving them lots of herbs and things for them to forage. Also making sure that the hamster's enclosure is deep enough that you can put in a really deep amount of bedding, and this is so that the hamsters can burrow inside their enclosure. It doesn't have to be a barred cage. In fact, I think tanks are a really good option for hamsters, but making sure that they have lots of ventilation at the top. So you need to make sure that you have enough room in your house to give your hamster a large enough enclosure. You can get some really beautiful ones as well. Like I said, with the tanks, you can really decorate them however you like, and you could go for a natural theme or a colourful theme. I just want to touch on the cages, which are often sold by pet shops, and why. So it is a misconception that hamsters only need a small enclosure, but not just that. A lot of cages which are sold in the UK and in the US can be really colourful, fun looking cages. That is because the companies are trying to appeal to children. So a child would go into the pet shop and see a really fancy cage and ask the parents for it. This is just a selling tactic and they don't actually cater to the needs of the hamsters at all. So it is really important to make sure that you have enough space for your hamster. Another thing to consider is that hamsters are most active at night. They don't really come out during the daytime. So this could be a positive for some people, but others it may be a negative. For me, I find this a positive because it means that I don't have to worry about when I go to work and leave them alone all day. They don't mind at all. They just sleep all day, so they really don't need any attention or interaction during the daytime. However, if you do want a pet that you can interact with during the daytime, I don't think a hamster would necessarily be for you, because you would have to wait all day until the evening when they do wake up, or possibly get up really early to play with them first thing in the morning. Another thing to consider with that is this means that hamsters are really active during the night time. So if you are planning on having your hamster live in your bedroom like I do, it does mean that you can hear them running on their wheel during the night, and if you are a light sleeper, this could be a problem for you. They may keep you up during the night. I personally don't mind it, but I know that that can be a negative for some people. I had a wheel at one point that was banging on the bars of the cage, and it didn't bother me even though I'm sleeping right next to them, but my sister in her bedroom, she could hear it and it was keeping her up at night. So I do think that's something that you need to consider. That might just mean that you don't home your hamster in your bedroom, or it might mean that maybe hamsters aren't for you. Another thing to think about when deciding whether or not you should get a hamster is whether or not you can afford it. So hamsters in general aren't that expensive to keep compared to some other animals. There is the upfront cost of buying the hamster and their enclosure. This can be a relatively inexpensive cost because you can either adopt your hamster, or even if you buy your hamster, they're generally like 10 to 20 pounds, which isn't too expensive. Enclosures can be more expensive, but there are a lot of different DIYs that you can do to make their enclosure, and that is an inexpensive option, so that is worth looking into. Day-to-day hamsters are also inexpensive to keep. I personally will buy a bag of hamster food, and that will last my 2 hamsters a couple of months, and it's really inexpensive because the bags of food are only a few pounds. The main cost month to month is replacing chew toys and giving them chews like Whimsy chews, which isn't really too expensive in itself, and also buying the bedding. So like I said, hamsters are burrowing animals, so they do need to have a really thick base of bedding. You only need to clean out a hamster's cage once a month if it is appropriately sized, but even so, due to the sheer amount of bedding that you do need to use, you still may go through quite a large amount of bedding, but this is still a relatively small cost. The cost that I am most concerned about is whether or not you're going to have money put aside for if they need to go to the vet. If your hamster gets ill or injured, like any pet, they will need to go to the vets and get treatment. Like other animals, the cost of taking them to the vets can be very expensive. It's really not negotiable whether or not they should go to the vets. If your hamster's hurt, or if they're in pain, if they're unwell, they really do need to go to the vets, and that can cost you a lot of money. I would just say make sure that you do have enough money put aside so that if something did ever happen, that you would be able to cover that cost. The next thing I want to talk about is the fact that hamsters are prey animals. So this means that when you first bring your hamster home, they will likely be very shy and very timid. Some hamsters are more so than others, depending on whether they have been handled previously, but in general, they are very timid animals. This means that when you bring your hamster home, that it's going to take a little while for you to bond with them and for them to get more confident with you, and some hamsters just aren't that sociable, but I personally think that it can be a really rewarding experience bonding with your hamster, seeing them grow in confidence and seeing them bond with you more and more. But if you want an animal that's going to be more outgoing and playful, hamsters aren't really like that. They are more shy and timid and calm and quiet, so that is just something that you may need to consider. As well as that, I would look into which species of hamster you are most interested in. There are a few different species of hamsters which are available to have as pets. I have Syrian hamsters. Syrian hamsters are the largest hamsters. This means that they are easy to handle, and I personally really love their personalities. But as well as that, they are very demanding, particularly the females. There are also a few different species of dwarf hamsters. There are Roborovsky hamsters and Russian dwarfs, and then there are also hybrids as well. And also there are Chinese hamsters, although I don't see those very often in the UK. I don't know whether you might do where you live, but it's worth looking into the different personalities and the different needs of the different hamsters to see which hamster would best suit you. Hamsters in general are solitary animals. Some people do home dwarf hamsters together, and I personally don't recommend this. Although some pairings can work. They may live together for years, happily fine with no problems, and then all of a sudden one of them can become territorial, and that could cause them to fight. And in some cases this even means that one hamster may end up killing the other one. So that's why I personally don't recommend housing dwarfs together. Sometimes this might just happen overnight. There isn't really a way that you can prevent it because there may have been no previous signs that this was going to happen. So I personally recommend just always housing your hamsters alone. They don't get lonely, they don't wish that they had a friend, they're not that sociable of an animal. Of course they will like coming out and being handled by you, but in general they don't need to have a friend, they don't get lonely, they are solitary animals. So if you wanted an animal which you could see interacting with other animals, I would maybe recommend a mouse or rats or guinea pigs. Those animals are sociable and they can be housed together and they prefer to be housed together. So I would maybe look into getting a different pet instead. The next thing I want to talk about is a hamster's lifespan. Different species of hamsters do have slightly different lifespans, but in general it's between 2 and 3 years. So when you are getting a hamster, you really need to think about, can you commit to this hamster for the next 2 to 3 years? I know that hamsters can be impulsively bought quite often, and so you really need to consider whether or not you can personally commit to that hamster for 2 to 3 years. But not just that, it can be really upsetting that you've got a hamster, you've formed a strong bond with them, then you start to see them showing signs of aging after maybe 1.5 years, and then they may not that long after pass away. That can be really upsetting. So it's just really up to you whether you think that 2 to 3 year lifespan will work for you. I personally really love having my hamsters, but it's all about what really works for you, your lifestyle, and what you're looking for in a pet. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video, and I hope that you found some of the information helpful. Let me know if you have a hamster yourself and what they're called. Let me know in the comments. I would be really interested to know. I always love hearing about other people's hamsters. Don't forget to like and subscribe before you go, and hopefully I will see you in a new video soon. Bye!